All right, so we're diving into some pretty heavy stuff today, the kind of news that stops you in your tracks. Hamas leader Yahya Sinwar confirmed dead.
Yeah, this isn't just another news cycle. This is one of those moments where things could really shift. Big time.
Definitely feels like one of those moments where you got to take a step back and say, okay, what does this even mean for everything?
Exactly. And to understand the weight of this, we got to understand who Sinwar was. I mean, yeah, Hamas chief in Gaza, but he was so much more than a title. Think of him as the architect, the mastermind behind that horrific massacre in Israel back on October 7th.
Over 1,200 people killed, more than 250 taken hostage. Just an unimaginable tragedy. And it really does feel like almost everything we're talking about now stems from that day.
Absolutely. That attack sent shockwaves across the globe, and Sinwar was at the heart of it. So this assassination, it's not just symbolic, it's deeply personal and strategic for Israel. This guy was their public enemy #1 for years.
And speaking of strategy, the world's reaction has been really interesting to watch. You've got Israel's foreign minister coming out swinging, calling this a victory for the entire free world against radical Islam.
Very strong words, definitely framing this as part of a much bigger ideological battle.
But then on the flip side, you've got the UN Security Council, just the day before, urging Israel to allow humanitarian aid into Gaza. It's almost like two completely different conversations happening at the same time.
It really highlights the tension at play here. Israel wants this seen as a win for global security, fighting against terrorism. But the international community, especially the UN, they're focused on that humanitarian crisis in Gaza, the need for peace and a resolution.
And the timing of it all, Sinwar's death coming right after that UN Security Council meeting, makes you wonder if Israel saw this as a chance to force their hand, achieve some of their war goals.
You gotta think so. And remember, the Israeli ambassador to the UN, he made some pretty pointed remarks about that timing, even called Sinwar's death an answer. Bold move, right?
Wow. Yeah. It's like they're sending a very clear message. We're handling this our way no matter what's being said in those meetings. Okay, so we've got this high-stakes chess game playing out on the global stage. Everyone reacting to Sinwar's assassination. But it's easy to forget the human side of all this. What about those hostages?
It's impossible to overstate what this must be like for them and their families. Every day that passes, the uncertainty, the fear, it's unimaginable.
And knowing that Sinwar was the one who orchestrated their capture in the first place, that had to weigh heavily on them. Did you see that there was actually a moment of relief when it was confirmed he wasn't killed with the hostages?
Right, I read that too. A tiny sliver of hope in the midst of unimaginable darkness. But then what? The question immediately becomes, now what?
Exactly, and that's what everyone's trying to figure out. We're hearing calls for their release from everywhere now, not just Israeli officials.
It's everyone, right? I mean, Yair Lapid, the opposition leader, he's demanding their immediate return. And even more heartbreaking, you've got the Hostage Families Forum making desperate pleas.
It's a chorus of voices, all saying the same thing. These are innocent people, let them go. But will Hamas even listen at this point?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? Sinwar's death, it throws everything up in the air. It could make negotiations more likely, or it could make them totally impossible.
How so? It seems like it could go either way.
Sinwar was known for being incredibly tough, uncompromising. Some analysts think that with him out of the picture, there might be space for a new leader to emerge. Someone who sees the hostages as a potential bargaining chip, a way to gain some international goodwill.
Okay, so there's a glimmer of hope there. But what about the flip side? Why would his death make things even worse for the hostages?
Well, think about what happens when you remove a powerful leader like that. You create a power vacuum. And within an organization like Hamas, a group born out of conflict, that vacuum can be incredibly dangerous.
So you're talking about internal power struggles, factions vying for control.
Exactly. And in that kind of chaos, in that fight for survival, the hostages become even more vulnerable. A new leader might see any talk of negotiation, any compromise, as a sign of weakness. The last thing they want is to appear soft.
And if that's the case, God, it's terrifying to even think about what that could mean for those hostages.
It's a very real possibility. And then you've got that chilling detail, that report about Sinwar being seen with those 6 hostages who were executed. We can't confirm it, but it's not exactly a reassuring sign.
It paints a pretty grim picture of how Hamas might be viewing these hostages right now. So we've got this potential powder keg within Hamas, and then you've got Israel grieving and furious, trying to figure out their next move.
They're under immense pressure to make Hamas pay for what happened on October 7th, and they desperately want to bring their people home. But they also know that any misstep, any escalation could spiral out of control.
It's a pressure cooker, and the whole world's watching to see what happens next. And it's not just Israel feeling the pressure here, right? This whole thing has much bigger implications.
Yeah.
Countries like Iran, they've always had a stake in this conflict. They must be watching this all very carefully.
Oh, absolutely. Iran's been a major backer of Hamas for years, providing them with money, weapons, you name it. Sinwar's death, it throws a wrench in their whole strategy.
So what do? Do they try to step in, influence who takes over Hamas, make sure it's someone who aligns with their interests? Or do they lay low and see how it plays out?
That's the big question, isn't it? Because Iran's response, it could either escalate the situation or, and this might surprise some people, it could actually push things towards some kind of peace.
It's hard to imagine things going towards peace right now,
Yeah.
but I guess stranger things have happened.
Right. It's a long shot, but it's not impossible. And meanwhile, you've got Israel dealing with their own internal pressures. They want revenge for what happened on October 7th. They want their hostages back, but they also don't want to do anything that's going to make the rest of the world turn against them.
It's like they're walking a tightrope, and every step could be their last.
That's a perfect way to put it. And I think that's what makes this whole situation so fascinating and so terrifying all at the same time. You've got all these different players, each with their own agendas, their own fears, their own goals, and nobody knows how it's all going to shake out.
It's like you said at the beginning, this isn't just another news story. Sinwar's death, it has the potential to reshape the entire region.
Absolutely. And as we try to make sense of it all, it's important to remember the human cost. Those hostages and their families, they're the ones caught in the middle of all this.
It's easy to get lost in the geopolitical chess game, but at the end of the day, this is about real people's lives. And we can't forget that.
We absolutely cannot. Well, we've covered a lot of ground today, but this is far from over.
Definitely not. We've talked about Sinwar's assassination, the global reaction, the hostages, the potential power struggle within Hamas, and what this all means for the region as a whole.
And we've only just scratched the surface. There are so many unanswered questions, so many different directions this could go.
Exactly. But hopefully, by diving into this topic, we've given our listeners a better understanding of what's at stake and what might be coming next.
That's the goal, isn't it? To help people make sense of a complex world.
Absolutely. So to everyone listening, stay informed, stay engaged, and stay curious. This story is far from over.